Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Jamie Lieberman joins the podcast today. Jamie is a lawyer and founder of #Legal. Jamie describes her firm as not only your lawyer, but a partner in your business. I love that description. Her firm focuses on helping you maximize your profit while protecting your assets. And seriously, like, who can't get behind that? Jamie and I met at Podcast Movement over the summer. And as you can hear me share with Jamie in our discussion, she was so approachable. Honestly, after a quick meeting, I was a little shocked that she was an attorney. Not because she wasn't professional, actually, quite the opposite. She was super professional and super approachable. And that's just not always expected or what we get from the legal profession. The conversation on our podcast today is rich. There are three main areas that we're going to talk about, and so I really want you to listen in. The first is naming your company brand. Next is legal entity. What entity are you going to set up? And the third is all about contracts. Super great information. You're not going to want to miss a moment. Enjoy the podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Jamie, welcome to Profit is a Choice.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. You and I met at Podcast Movement at a luncheon that Carol Cox had pulled together. And I was just immediately drawn to you. And you're just so energetic. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but you don't always meet lawyers that are super energetic. And it's kind of like when I meet an accountant or a bookkeeper that's like that. I'm like, oh, that was a breath of fresh air. So it was fun.
That's my favorite compliment to get.
You just have like such a great personality. You know what I mean? We have these ideas of what certain, I guess, people in jobs should be like, and you don't fit maybe a stereotype to some degree. And I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm glad you took that in a good way.
I do. It's a huge compliment. Listen, I've been a lawyer for almost 15 years. I've met many lawyers and I realize exactly what you're saying because I won't lie. I don't like to be in a room full of lawyers.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. Many in our industry, they might love working with lawyers, but the thing they hate the most? Handing you their contract.
Yes.
Because a lot of lawyers are, they redline everybody's contract and then sit down and tell them how they should be writing that contract, which, doesn't really start a relationship off great, if I have to say. So there is some trepidation around lawyers with handing them anything with a contract.
I think there's a lot of fear around it. And a lot of it, I think, comes from one, past dealings,
Mm-hmm.
two, other experiences that maybe your colleagues have had, or three, just not enough information or not the right person.
Right.
And so all those strings combined, and there's a reason there's a lot of fear around it. And so sort of having that conversation with the right lawyer, I think, can make all the difference. It should not be scary.
I would agree with that. I have worked with multiple lawyers in my 20 years of business. And I have to say, it's like anything, you have to see if it's the right fit for you. Can I have a conversation? Do they make me feel stupid? Do they make me feel supported? Like, what is this relationship like? And I think it's the same relationship that homeowners have when they're trying to select a designer. They're not all the same either.
Yeah.
Or when we're trying to find out, is this the right bookkeeper for me, or accountant, or coach, or advisor? Are we meshing, and are they meeting my need, and do I feel understood and heard and supported? And so I immediately felt all those things just meeting you over lunch. So I think that's like really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about the fear, because fear is a really, I guess it's kind of a topic that shows up a lot. There are a couple of topics, as believe it or not, as I'm digging into profitability with people, the topics that keep coming up, this overwhelming idea of fear and confidence,
Mm.
trust, it's over, and it permeates all aspects of our business and of our communications and of our choices. And the whole idea for my podcast here is that profit is a choice, meaning that we're making choices all the time. And so what we don't want to do is make choices out of fear. We want to make them with courage and with having sound information. What How can we start to alleviate some of the fear when we're looking at the legal side of our business?
I think it starts with getting information. For me, I think that having those initial conversations, asking around in your network is the right way to start. Most people become afraid of a topic or a subject because you avoid it. And so when you avoid it or you get bad information, particularly when you Google it, it can be very, very scary. So finding the right person who can break it down and make it easy is the way to go. And I agree with you. I think in my practice, I have a consultation with almost every person that walks through the door that's looking for legal help. It's free. With talks, we last about 15 minutes and we just chat. I learn a little more about your business. I tell you more about ours. And I think a lot of times that alleviates some of the fear, making sure that the person who you're talking to understands your business and is able to have that easy conversation, not filled with legalese.
I agree with that. And I do think it's that initial conversation that sets the stage to make somebody feel comfortable, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's approachable. It's that I am going to spend the time. I think there's a common perception with attorneys. There's two, I think. Well, there's many, but I'll talk about two. One is that they're going to bill you for every single minute you speak to them, which a lot of attorneys do. We don't do that in my practice. And there's one of the reasons for that is the trust issue. And two, that they're going to talk down to you or not, respond to your emails quickly or get back to you. And that's another perception that I always want to go away because we want to make it really easy and really accessible.
I think from the consumer's side of looking into it, I would agree with you on both of those. And it's almost like this idea of robotic versus personable.
Yeah,
Do you
I
know what
agree with
I'm
that.
saying?
Hmm.
And so there's this idea that I'm just another person coming through, and that there's not a lot of care for
Hmm.
who I am in my business, that I'm just I'm just another piece of paper being shuffled through.
Yes.
Versus that 15 minutes. Yeah, I think that's an important point too, Jamie, is that it doesn't take that long to really connect with somebody.
No.
And it's not like you got to spend 3 hours to hear an entire backstory and life story to say I can help you with one contract. It could be 10 or 15 minutes, regardless of what we're doing, even when we're talking designer to homeowner. That 10 to 15 minutes of real organic connection can set a stage to build an entire relationship on. And so I find that to be super exciting that your company does that. I think that's probably what I picked up from you, honestly, in a few minutes chatting before we had lunch. Was okay, this is somebody who's personable. This is somebody who is not scary, because what you do, there's a lot of fear around being sued, or being there's fear around what if our contract doesn't cover us, or what if, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
fear around all of that, and then fear around the person who's supposed to help me is not
Hmm.
conducive to a great relationship. And so I love that your entire firm feels the same way that you feel. So no matter who we call and talk to, we should have a very similar experience.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I liked what you said about it doesn't take that much time. I set those a lot of I get this question a lot from other entrepreneurs or particularly service professionals who are often having these consultations about how it stays at 15 minutes. And I set really clear boundaries. I use an Acuity scheduling link so that people know that it is about 15 minutes. I'm not overly rigid. So if it goes 20, it's okay. But I do try to adhere to that 15 minutes. And that actually allows people, once they know that up front, they actually tend to give me the information I need pretty quickly. So I'm able to ask the right questions. And we obviously have follow-up questions. That 15 minutes is really just to get to know each other. And you can tell pretty quickly if, someone feels like a good fit. So it works out really well. And I take really good notes that I leave in my client files so that I can remember everybody. And when someone does come back and need assistance, I look back at my notes and I can remember all the little details about that person's particular business.
So, I know you haven't always focused just on creatives and marketing influencers and Instagram influencers, because of course we haven't always had those, but
Mm.
you know, where you started was much more corporate and all of that. How did you, what made you leave that and start your own firm and then focus the way that you have?
So you're right. I started in the very traditional lawyer route, go to law school, graduate, and then we call it in the legal profession big law. Those are the massive law firms that you pretty much read about. I went to work at one of those in New York City. I did that for a few years, and I was a litigator. I was in lawsuits, so it was a very different practice than I have now. And we did complex commercial litigation, so many, many, many millions of dollars at stake, large corporations, nameless, faceless, that kind of thing. And so what I realized through doing that experience was I really loved being a lawyer, but I really knew I needed client contact. I needed to feel like I was making a difference in some way.
Hmm.
So I actually switched gears and went to work for the federal government thinking, okay, maybe I can make a difference. And I was wrong. We
Wow.
can be naive in our early parts of our career.
Hmm.
And while I did get amazing experiences with both of those workplaces, and I learned what I needed to in order to do what I do now, I also found out quickly that working in litigation for the government was also not where I wanted to be. So I left. I just had a moment where I sat down with my husband and just had my first son. And I said, I need to figure, I know I wanted to work, but I'm like, I need to figure out a way to be a lawyer on my terms. And so he was really supportive. And so I left those jobs that were, obviously very safe. And I started to freelance in order to, kind of keep my legal brain going and obviously needed to pay the bills. So I was freelancing. And in the meantime, while I was freelancing, and I was also a professor at Seton Hall Law School, where I taught as an adjunct a few different classes. And so while I was doing all that, I was really kind of trying to find myself. And I was scraping together, freelance jobs, basically doing work for other lawyers. And I started working for a blogging conference company because I had been a blogger for many years and I had a creative side to me and I really wanted to continue to do that. And I was interested in the blogging space. This was like 7 years ago. And I was really interested in the blogging space because I had a sense that things were going to start to become more of a business. And that's really where I started to be interested in working with more creatives because I spoke, I want to say about 5 years ago, I spoke at a blogging conference for the first time about legal issues for bloggers. And a whole bunch of bloggers came running up to me saying, there are no lawyers. Can you represent us? Can you help us? And that's actually where the law firm started because I realized there was just a huge gap in the industry. And from those clients came other creatives, the designers, and then the service professionals.
Hmm.
And there's a common thread through all the types of clients that we have now, because now we have clients in a lot of different industries, which I love. It's so cool. But the thing about them is they are all underserved by the legal profession.
Right.
They all have very similar issues. So it's just worked out really well and it sort of organically grew. And I feel very lucky. I love it because I love my clients.
Right. I think about, oh gosh, so much is going through my head right now. I say that all the time, but just like, whoo, the wheels are spinning. One thing I just want to say for those that are listening that can maybe learn a little bit from your journey and apply it to theirs is that you had to try a couple of things to figure out what you didn't like, to then maybe have an idea of what you did like. Right. And
I love that you just said that. I don't mean to interrupt you. This
no,
is
please.
a drum I beat. I get a lot of emails from young lawyers in particular going, I want to do what you did. I want to do that. How did you create this law firm? Because my law firm is virtual and all my staff are women and they're all flexible. So I have a lot of moms that work for me and they have flexible hours. And that's a common refrain in the legal industry. And the first piece of advice I give is you have to put your time in. You can't just start from the beginning. You have
Yes.
to figure out all the places that you don't want to do. Because I never would have known that my true love was the actual client contact and counseling of clients without having to do all those other things I didn't love as much.
Right. And those things also gave you a background and a confidence to be able to go out on your own and do it. I know I would not have the business I have right now when I first started. I wouldn't have even known that I enjoyed it and liked it at the level that I do. You know what I'm saying? And
100%.
a lot of times I coach and advise my clients, if you can't tell me what you want to do, tell me what you don't want to do, because we can learn from that. And
Hmm.
so I love that you were willing to try a few things. And then I think many of us have been in that same space, Jamie, of okay, what now? Like, what am I going to do now? And how do I make a business? And how do I figure out how to bring in an income or serve my passion or do something that I want to do while I'm still a mom and wife and friend and sister and all these other,
Yes.
things. And so, uh, and then the other part of it is I know in a couple of the podcasts that I've had, we talk very much about when you're trying to choose, let's call it your support team of either your accountant or your bookkeeper. One of the challenges has always been, but they don't understand our industry, but they
Hmm.
don't understand our industry. And so the advice is sometimes different than what it may be if they truly understood our industry. And to your point, it's the same thing in the legal field. People are going, okay, the fact that I even have to describe what a podcast is to you makes me nervous about you being able to help me create any kind of legal needs that I have for my podcast. If you don't even know what a podcast is, or if you don't understand what blogging is, and if you don't even understand design, how do I trust that you know how to build the contract that my client's going to be okay with? So there is some niching and specialization that can be super beneficial, but it is something you have to figure out.
Exactly. It's do I am a big proponent of doing as many things as you can, not at once, because your head will explode. But I really think that you should sometimes stretch yourself, try new things. I think part of the problem is a lot of people, if we're talking about fear, have a huge fear of failure. I've started many businesses that have failed, and that's okay. I started a parenting blog a long time ago, and it was fine, but my heart was never into it because that's not where my best writing comes out. And I realized that it just didn't feel like me. And I was fine with it. It's okay. I was proud of that I tried, but it didn't do great. And that's all right. And so a lot of people struggle with that fear of failure. And so instead of just trying things, sometimes the biggest success is the failure because I tried that parenting blog, it brought me back to the blogging space. It then brought me to hashtag legal and all of those things. So you can trace a lot of those failures into some amazing successes. And so letting go of wanting to know where you're going to be in 3 years.
Mm.
A lot of people are like, I just want to, build this huge thing and do all that. There's so many steps along the way that you can't skip. And being comfortable with that is something you have to get used to. And that I think is one of the biggest keys to success.
I would agree with that. I heard one time before and have said it on the podcast before, and if anybody's heard it, there's no elevator to the top. You have to take the stairs.
Yes.
And I think that's just kind of a great visual. We have to take the stairs to the top. There's not an elevator in this building.
And
And
sometimes you gotta pause on a landing because you're tired.
or go down a flight, right? To get to the
Yes.
bathroom, whatever.
Yes.
It's not always a straight up
No.
um, opportunity here. So you focus now. I mean, like you said, you have a myriad of industries that you support and serve, but you do a lot with creatives and influencers and designers and people in our industry. What are some of the areas that you think creatives should focus on to protect their business? Like just a couple of basics if we're just starting out.
The first is your contract. That for me, when you're any kind of service professional, and I'm pushing creatives into that service professional realm
Yes.
because you're providing a service to other people, your contract is paramount. You need to have a good one, and you need to make sure that you're fully covered. That doesn't mean asking your friend for their contract or cobbling together with a bunch of contracts you found online. Now, if you have that contract, because this is where everyone always panics, because there's many people listening who going, oh my God, that's my contract.
Hmm.
It's totally okay. You already won because you have a contract.
Or
But
ahead
it's
of those that
really,
have nothing, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. And those who have nothing, you're not allowed to panic either. It's fixable. So the thing about business is every single business is unique. Those form templates, the borrowing from your friends, you're going to have different issues than your friend is, even if you guys have similar businesses, because other things are going to pop up with your clients that may not pop up with your friends' clients. And so it's really important to take stock of that and to make sure that not only you have an attorney take a look at your agreement, but that you're regularly revisiting it. A lot of people come to me and say, all right, my lawyer wrote this for me 5 years ago. I've never looked at it since. And that happens a lot. I get that, but it's good to revisit it because industries change, businesses change. I mean, my business, what it is today, is nothing like it was 5 years ago. And that happens particularly in the design world when technology is changing, how clients work with you is changing, pricing change, so much changes. Intellectual property becomes an issue. It's just really important to sort of revisit it. I say like once a year. If something pops up with a client that you realize is not really covered by your agreement, definitely get that fixed as soon as you can. Because the contract can change and it should change. And you can't think of everything. So everybody wants sort of the kitchen sink thinking, I can think of everything. Things are going to come up you just didn't contemplate. People are very surprising. And so it's okay for that to happen. You just need to make sure that you fix it for the future.
So to me, it's one of those things we need to consider our contracts as kind of living documents. They're not
Yes.
once and done. And it's so easy to think, okay, I've invested in this, I've created it, it's done. I remember when I was doing the workroom business and we would have terms and conditions, and I literally, I would run into some issue with a client and I would go back and add to my terms and conditions. And I could
Mhm.
almost say, that's the Williams clause. That's the
Mm,
Lieberman clause. Like I knew
yes.
who it was that made me feel like I needed to put that in my terms and conditions. And I had to laugh when it sounds terrible, but when we sent our first son off to college and we got kind of the dorm contract, one of the comments in the dorm contract was that they could not put up a stripper pole in their room. And I looked at my husband and I was like, oh my gosh, we're sending our kid to college to stay in a dorm. And we literally have to sign that there. I said, that means somebody did that.
Yes.
And that's why they had to put it in the dorm contract. I mean, that's horrible. I mean,
That's
it's funny, but it's horrible. And I mean, this is my first kid. I'm sitting
yeah.
up, I'm looking at eight. This isn't some like random house. This was the state school dorm. And I was like, okay, they probably have a name next to that, right?
Yes,
Okay. So
exactly.
terrible, terrible way to have to express it, but that's what it was. And I also, to your point, so I love that. Let's think of these as living documents. They have to change, and they're not one size fits all. And I know, Jamie, that you would agree with that. If we're doing let's say a furnishings plan for a client, we're choosing all of the furnishings in their home. That is a very different contract than I'm going to help you do a whole house build. That's a completely different contract because the needs and the work that you're doing, so there may be a lot of similarities, but we may need to have more than one contract for engaging with our clients based on the work product that we are producing, correct?
Yeah, I actually call it the sliding scale
Okay.
of complexity, because what you've described is from most simple to most complex.
Yes.
And this is with a lot of creatives, whether you're just strategizing with a client and just offering options to doing it for them to wrangling a lot of different third parties. They're very different clauses that will go in. And you're right, the bones of it are probably going to be pretty similar. And there is your boilerplate sort of legal language, but then there's other things that come into place that aren't boilerplate. And those are the ones you have to be most careful with. So many of my designer clients have multiple contracts, multiple versions of their contract, I should
Right.
say, depending on the services they're offering.
I also know that, and I love that you mentioned that the contracts needed to probably be reviewed, revised, looked at, whatever you want to call it, each year. I know we got an email from our estate planning lawyer last year who said, by the way, it's been 18 years since you created your plan, and you really need to come back in and redo this because we created the plan like right after we had our first son, for here's everything that's going to happen in our world and our life and to our kids. And now they're 22 and 24. And it's a bit different. And we went back in, and the laws had shifted and things had changed, and trust and all those things that were one way 20 years ago. That's not where they are, and we probably should have kept it updated all along. We just honestly, we didn't think about it.
No,
And
that's a common one not to think about.
yeah. And the minute he reached out, we sat down and went, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, we don't need people to be guardians of our kids. They're of legal age. We don't need somebody else to manage the money. We can let them manage it. I mean, there were just all those things, plus just the changes that happened. So I love that you brought that up because I do know there's so many things as an entrepreneur that are coming at us. And we think that when we've done something, it's done, but it does need to continually be looked at and thought about. And so I think that I'd like to put a big exclamation behind that when you said it. What are a couple more areas that we could look at? So let's say we have the contract buttoned down, it's buttoned up, all put together. What else do we need to think about?
There are two other areas. The first is whether or not it makes sense to form a company. And some people who are sole proprietors just do business as their own name. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you don't form an entity, whether it's an LLC or a company, you leave yourself potentially open for liability personally.
Hmm.
When you form an LLC or a corporation, it's easier to shield your personal assets from potential liabilities of your business. A lot of people get started maybe as a hobby, or they didn't intend to build a business and then all of a sudden they have one. And so that happens a lot where they say, "Yeah, I've been thinking about it." And I they'll come to me and they're like, "Yeah, I've been doing this for a year or two and I know I need to form a business. I just haven't done it yet." That's just one of those things to sort of get done. I'm of the mindset that if you are starting a business, just form your business immediately. Don't wait to make money. Everybody's always waiting to make money and then you're scrambling. Just make it one of those line items in the budget that you're making when you're starting your business. I think that's pretty important. And, it's important to talk to both an attorney and an accountant about the proper corporate form. There are legal issues and there are tax issues. And so there's no one size fits all. It will definitely depend not only on your business, but your personal financial situation. So it's really important to have an accountant who has an understanding of your whole financial picture to help with that. But talk to both a lawyer and an accountant. Accountants tend to focus solely on the money and they sometimes discount how important it is to shield your personal assets. And I've heard some advice from some accountants saying, "Oh, don't bother. You don't need to. It's just extra fees you don't need." But there are really good reasons to form one. And so just get advice from both. And ideally, your attorney and your accountant could talk to each other if there's an issue. I've definitely gotten on the phone with some of my clients' accountants, and we've talked it out and figured out the best fit for the client. The other issue is naming.
Let's
This
stop before we go to naming.
Yeah, sure.
I want to dig into the entity for just a minute, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
I am not a legal advisor in anything, but I beg my clients to at least start with an LLC. Please,
Yeah.
please, because you can go from an LLC to and be taxed as an S corp. You can move with an LLC. And I also, the minute I say to them, do you really want the opportunity to have every one of your assets and anything that your name is on, like your husband's stuff, do you really want that up? um, as something that could be taken so easily from your companies, like you said, to talk about shielding it. But the other part that I dig into is, please, if you create an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, I don't care, some entity different than a sole proprietor, do not commingle your funds
Yes.
because that pierces that veil, right?
Mhm.
And then you're in trouble. And so you pretty much are saying, hey, I want to protect myself and put this in place, but not really, because I'm going to run all my personal stuff through it. And so I spend a lot of time with my clients saying, you've said you're an LLC, you've done the paperwork, you're an LLC that's filing taxes as an S corp. That's what I see the most of. but you're running all your personal stuff through your accounts, and that is putting you at major risk. And so, like you, I spend time with their accountant, their bookkeeper, their advisor, their financial person, helping them pull this thing apart. And so, I just want to just encourage, if anybody's just starting, I totally agree. Don't wait till you make money. Set it up correctly from the beginning. Speak to your lawyer, speak to your accountant, speak to your financial advisor.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have my advisor speak to my accountant because they're looking at our entire life portfolio and decision making from different perspectives. And I just want to make sure that it all meshes and matches. And we want the same thing for those that are listening, right? Not to just take a singular view of the business.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important to have those professionals talk to each other and evaluate all of the issues. But your point about not commingling of funds is so important. Lawyers call it observing the corporate formalities,
Oh,
and you need, yeah, that's what it's
I've
called.
heard piercing the corporate veil, but I've not
Yes,
heard.
observing
Say that again.
corporate. So you need to observe your corporate formalities, which
Got it.
essentially means you need to have separate bank accounts. Only business expenses and business income goes into your business checking, business credit card, business savings. If you have an LLC, the way you take out money is through distributions. If you're an S corp, you can pay yourself a salary, but it has to be reasonable
Mhm.
for the job that you're performing. So I actually just had a conversation with the client who said, "Oh, I'm going to do an S corp. I'm going to pay myself 10,000 a year." I'm like, "Oh no, please don't do that. You're going to get flagged real fast." So it's pretty important that if you are going to go the S corp route and you do pay yourself a salary through that it's a reasonable salary for the job you're performing. The other thing that's important is make sure that your contracts are signed in your LLC name, if you're having an LLC, obviously, or your corporate name, entity name. You also want to make sure that checks are written in the LLC name. Your website terms and conditions and privacy policy are in the LLC name. Just have it everywhere. And that's how you want to do your business. And that's how you maintain those corporate formalities. Because, like you said, if you don't maintain those corporate formalities and you do get into a lawsuit and someone tries to pierce the corporate veil, it could be challenging. And then again, there was your personal assets could be at risk.
Mhm. Whew, I hope everybody took note of that. I mean, I just can't. And I'd love that you even mentioned make sure you speak to a lawyer as well. I have had a couple of clients that husbands. I mean, they were. I'm just going to say they were wealthy business owners. Okay, they had done very well for themselves. In two of the cases, the wife had started an interior design business or had one, and she had it set up as a sole proprietor, and they
Mm,
had a lot that could be at risk.
mhm,
Mhm. And I meant they're different states because every state has a little bit of maybe a different approach to LLCs and the charges and the fees. It's not the same. Some are done very easily online. Some take a little bit more, but it varies by state. But anyway, I said to her, I said to both of them, I beg you to go talk to your accountant and to your lawyer and to get this set up. I beg you. You have so much on the line. I need you to know what's on the line. And both of them in different states, their accountant said the same thing that you said. Oh, it's just a bunch of paperwork. It doesn't
mm,
really matter.
mhm.
I wanted to go call that accountant and smack them.
Yep.
It was not, in my opinion, information that was going to protect my client. And
Uh-huh.
I begged them to go call. Both of them ended up talking to a lawyer in their area and going around what the accountant had suggested, but they just told him it was a bunch of paperwork that they didn't need. And that just it broke my heart because it I mean they really had a lot of assets that could have been on the line if
Mm.
something had happened.
Yeah, I never understand when accountants give that advice, honestly.
I don't. I mean, I can understand there being some wiggle room between when you're an LLC and when you move to an S corp, as you said, so that you can be paid what's fair and reasonable, and you can balance out salary and distributions. I get that piece, but the LLC is just so straightforward
Mhm. Yep.
that it at least should be highly considered over a sole proprietorship.
Agreed.
So what is the third? We've talked about contracts, we've talked about legal entity, and I think you went to say something about naming. Name
Yes.
what?
Yes. So when you are starting out, or even if you've been in business for a little while, if you're not doing business under your own personal name, if you've decided to pick more of a trade name, it's just important that you confirm that that trade name is not infringing on someone else's trademark. So many people go out, they do a very quick Google search, they say, oh, no one else has it, or they buy the domain or get a social handle and they say, oh, well, if the social handle is available, then I can definitely have this name. And that is just not always the case. So it is very important that you make sure that that trade that trade name that you're using is not infringing on someone else's mark, because the last thing you want to do is spend all this money on branding, on a website, on a design, on a logo, and then to get a cease and desist. And it happens a lot.
Really?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
So how do they protect the name? So can you just give us like, do they check it within the state and within, I mean, I've certainly seen online multiple people with the same name,
Sure.
um,
So
that
you
maybe
can
had only registered by state and, not by US.
So when you register an LLC name, that isn't actually doing anything to protect your name. A lot of people do confuse that. That's a very different thing than using a trade name or a brand. Using a trade name or a brand name, which would be more like a trademark. And just because your LLC name, like I could have Jamie Lieberman LLC, and then my trade name is hashtag legal. That's different. And so the important thing to remember is if you are going to use that trade name, it's just not about whether you get the LLC name. You want to obviously do Google searches to make sure you don't find anybody who's currently using the name. But you also want to search through the trademark. They have a database. You can Google, it's capital T, capital E, capital S, capital S. If you Google TESS and the US Patent and Trademark Office, you'll find their database. And unfortunately, is not very user friendly.
Yeah.
We actually subscribe in my practice because we do a lot of trademark work to specialty databases that allow us to do these searches much more easier and much more broader. But if you are starting out and you just want to do a quick search through tests, Google it, look around, do some research, just make sure that nobody else is using it. But the important thing to remember is it's not just the same name, but a similar name in the same category of goods or services that you're offering. So what a lot of people get caught up in is similar names. They don't realize what would be considered a similar name, because you, as a person who, obviously doesn't have much knowledge of trademark law, because why would you, may think, oh, there's no way those are similar. The trademark office and the laws may say that they are. And also goods and services that are the same or similar, you may think to yourself, well, there's no way anybody would confuse that, or those goods and services are not similar. And it may be that the trademark office would say that they were.
Mm.
So it's just important to make
That's not one
sure
area at all that I have thought about tackling by myself. It's just not. I know
you
my,
shouldn't.
no way. My company name is The Scarlet Thread LLC, but my trademark is Scarlet Thread Consulting.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and I know I've trademarked a couple of other, like some of my signature programs. I'm working through trademarking my podcast right now, and we've had to send one letter out to say we don't believe we're the same, but it might show up. Are you going to come against us? We've
Hmm.
had to do back and forth letters. So there's a lot that goes into that, a lot more than I think we think about. And I just wouldn't, I don't know, I'm just personally going to say I wouldn't trust going online, doing a search and doing it by myself. There's a lot more to it, and I did not know that. I still don't know a lot of the ins and outs, but I know that it is much more complex than maybe what I thought it was when I first started looking into getting a trademark.
Trademark law is one of those areas I would never recommend DIY. And I also don't recommend LegalZoom or any of those. I fix a lot of mistakes in my practice of people who try to do it themselves, or people who use the LegalZoom type of
Mhm.
services.
Right.
It's honestly one of the most complicated areas of law. And it's one that if you do use a lawyer, make sure they're a qualified trademark lawyer, not just someone who's decided they want to check it out. and that is one of their areas of practice. It's important. It takes many, many, many years to get to be a really good trademark lawyer.
Right. And then, I mean, there are a lot of details that they ask, like even when I was trying to just, I'd say just as if I like, just go do that. Like, how hard can that be? And they're like, okay, tell me, is this video only? Where do you do the video? Is it downloadable video? And what do they do with this? And do you talk to them or do you not talk to them? I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, it's just a lot to cover one thing. So I support you and make sure that you have good legal representation as you do a trademark.
Yeah, it's definitely that's I beat that drum a lot.
Yeah. Well, I now know to beat that drum, after
Yes.
I'm working on my fourth one. But when I first started, I didn't know. I mean, I certainly went and checked out some of the online providers. And then I looked at it and I thought, number one, I don't want to answer all those questions and not know what it means. Number two, I don't know that I can trust that. So
Mm,
I was like, I'm not doing that. And the same thing with contracts. You don't want to, unless you know who it is that's giving you the contract, I want to know that they know what they're doing. Just like our clients come to us because they know that we know what we're doing, right? They're not going to go hire
exactly.
somebody who only does bathroom design and say, please outfit my family room. I mean,
Yes.
that's not going to work so well. So I've heard some people say things like, the legal stuff doesn't matter, and we know that it does. That makes me cringe when they, well, I've worked 3 years with a handshake and never had to have a contract. And I've heard him say the same thing about getting liability insurance or anything. I haven't
Oh,
needed it yet. And I'm like, that's the point. And when you need it, it's not there, and that's when it shows up. This isn't about all the times you, in air quotes, got by without it. This is about the one time that you don't skate by.
I, I I hope I never need my malpractice and liability insurance.
Right, but I will keep it up to
That is a
date.
check I will happily write every year.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
why do we think the same thing about not having a contract or not having the right legal entity or not having our name protected? Those things matter, and they matter because the minute it comes up, if
Oh
you've
yeah.
not protected yourself, I mean, the cost to fix it is more than the cost to protect it.
That's that is the greatest way to put it. I have more clients that come to me in crisis, and I can do the best that I can, but I am awesome, but I cannot make magic. And so I can think of so many examples of people who, just didn't deal with it, and then it comes right back to them. I had a name issue where I had a client spend a lot of money on a rebrand, not bother to check the name. I mean, I would probably say like 20 times what it would have cost just to have us check the name. And as soon as it launched, get a very quick cease and desist. And there was nothing we could do because it was a clear infringement. And that's happened many times, many, many, many times. I've had clients who have done a whole bunch of work and then their client doesn't pay, but there's no contract. And so we're combing through emails, and the amount of time it takes me to comb through many, many, many email strings and to try to put together a letter to say, hey, you owe this money. And this is not small sums of money. This is 20, 30, $40,000.
Right.
Um, it's just really harder to get the result than if you would have spent the time on the front end. I see people who hire coaches, I see people who hire marketing experts, and they just skip the legal and the accounting because it's either not interesting to them, they don't view it as a profit center, or they're just ignoring it because they're afraid of it or don't want to deal with it. And I can promise you there's almost no one out there it hasn't affected in some way when you fully ignore it.
Well, and the whole profit is a choice. And of course, I get the same thing you get, Jamie. They come to me and they'll show me their P&L and L and their balance statement once they've got one, and they show it to me and they want me to work magic. And I'm like, I, I, I can't. But what I can do is help you go back and put some things in place to fix it or to look at it or change it. Like, and I'm digging the way you're digging through emails. I'm digging through expenses. I'm digging through income. I'm trying to figure out, where is this going off the rails? Whereas if we put good business practices in place at the very beginning, all of these choices matter. And that is like the whole reason that I do this podcast is the idea that we can only focus on the pieces that we like or the pieces that bring us joy or the pieces that are easy of a business. That is not enough. If anything, we almost need to look at the areas of our business that challenge us the most, because quite often that might be where a profit center is sitting that we're not even looking at. And taking care of the legal, that absolutely impacts our profit because of what you said. I have a couple of friends that just went through audits, but they
Mm.
just were randomly chosen to go through an educational audit for their state. And believe it or not, the state government owed one of them money back after they
Mm.
went through it.
No way.
However, yeah, however, it cost her a whole lot more than that to pay the accountant to go
Mm.
through the audit and to defend everything. So she still lost.
Mm.
She still lost.
Yep.
Right. It wasn't like the state came up and said, "Hey, this is a random audit. We'll pay all your accounting and bookkeeping fees so that you can, oh, and by the way, we owe you this amount of money, but it cost you this to get it back." I mean, she'd have been happy to just say, keep the money and move on. Right.
Right.
But you don't get those options. And it's the same thing with legal. When somebody's coming after you, you don't really get the option to go, yeah, I really just don't want to deal with this.
I actually have a client right now who's like, I don't want to handle this. I'm like, if you don't, you're going to get sued. Like, I
you
can't,
don't
there's
get to
only,
walk away.
yeah. And I really am of the mindset that if you have those spaces in your business that you literally dread and cannot do, rethink about whether or not you should be in business or want to be in business for yourself. It may be that that's not
Mhm.
the best fit, and that's okay.
Right.
Not everybody really wants to or should be in business for themselves. And so some of my clients have ended up saying, like, I hate this so much. It overwhelms me so much. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I get that. There's no shame in that. But yeah, you do. I mean, look, there's stuff in my business I don't like dealing with, but you got to do it.
Same. I mean, I think we all have areas of our business that we're either passionate about or we have strengths in, right? Or we just have experience, we know, and it comes more readily. But it's those other areas. For me, the part of my business, honestly, that I struggle with more than anything is that advertising marketing.
Mm.
And it's not that I don't understand it, it's that I don't even have time for it. There's so many nuances to it. You know, I've got multiple people that I've hired to help me with it, but it is not the place where I feel like I just rock it out. It's the place that I have to force my attention to make it happen. The financial side, I got that. I love that. Like, I am the nerd that I told somebody the other day. It was, we're recording this right after Labor Day. I was sitting waiting on the bank to see if they were going to send me that your account is ready or if they were going to make me wait until Labor Day. And the minute that comes in my email, I am like a kid in the candy store. I cannot wait to go look at, and I know that that is weird. So I fully admit it. But I love it. I love watching the money and knowing where it's flowing in and flowing out and what it's doing. I get it, but that's not what everybody likes. You enjoy the legal aspect. That's not what everybody else might like. But it doesn't mean we don't have to look at it, and it doesn't mean we don't pay it attention, because again, the impact of not doing those things is so much worse than taking care of it from the beginning. I love how you started off with, start with, making sure that, I mean, I would probably say get your legal entity set up first, then make sure you have or your name first, get the legal entity, get the contract, get those basics, and then you can move out from there for the other things that you might need. But don't go start a business without having that and insurance and knowing how you're going to manage your money and whacked out bank accounts. It's just like, it doesn't, I get how we can start that way, kind of by accident, if you will. But at some point, we have to stop and put a stake in the ground and say, this is serious stuff.
I totally agree.
Serious stuff. So, all right, as we've talked about all these things that are important, is there anything else that you think a business owner that it might show up on their have to have list?
So this is for some more experienced business owners or ones that are scaling, but understand and know the difference between an employee and an independent contractor.
Oh, yes.
That's a big one. That varies state to state. Some states, like California, are very, very, very rigid. Other states are, not as strict. But it's just important that you understand those differences. And when you're hiring someone, even an employee, make sure you have the right agreements in place. You don't want to be able to hire an employee and then have them be able to walk out and take all your clients. So it's just important that you protect yourself, even if it's your best friend, even if it's your neighbor, even if it's someone you've known for 15 years. The other thing I want to point out is if you're in a partnership, please have a partnership agreement.
Yes, yes, yes.
I,
Can I just stop and give you a hallelujah on that? I've worked with multiple from a
oh,
coaching perspective that come in and there's no managing partner agreement. There's nothing.
it's brutal.
And
It's,
I beg them, listen, and I've done it, right? I've been in one, and I beg them, I'm like, it's like you're getting married and
yes,
just the prenup. But trust
yes,
me, the divorce is coming.
it's
So go
brutal.
ahead and plan for how you're going to exit. So
Hmm.
you exit well. Because
Yep.
even if you like even the company that the partnership that I was in, there were five of us. Even when we all chose to exit, we had it written, we had it revised by multiple lawyers so that when we were able to exit, it was as smooth as it could be. And it still feels like a breakup because these are people that you've been with all day, every day for some period of time. So there's still, emotion that goes into it, but it's laid out in advance and it's clear. And that was such a relief. Uh, Hallelujah, Jamie. Hallelujah.
I will tell you that one of the biggest parts of my practice in the beginning part of this year, it's funny how things sort of come in and out. Like sometimes I have a lot of trade. It depends on the time of year. But I would say the first 6 to 8 months of 2019, I dealt with more, I call them business divorces,
Yeah.
more breakups of partnerships than I've dealt with in a very long time, most of which had no agreements.
And they're
I have
painful. They are painful.
painful. I have one that ended up going to litigation and the
Mm.
business just wasn't worth it. Like it's it I cannot stress enough how important it is to put this in place when you're in a good place because the emotions that you talk about, they are very very real. It is like grieving a death.
Yes, it is.
There is anger, there is sadness, there's resentment. Even for the two people who are in the best possible place, you are going to run the gamut of all of those emotions.
Yes.
I had a partner in my practice and she left last year. We had an agreement in place. We did it very quickly and it was very easy. And I actually did a whole podcast about it on my podcast. There were a lot of emotions that went into it.
Yes.
It was really hard and there were no hard feelings between us.
Right.
Um, it's one of the hardest things to navigate, and having that agreement makes it so much easier.
Yes. I know even when we went through our business breakup, it was because we sold the company. So it wasn't even, it wasn't due to some horrible situation, but that unmingling, that
Mm,
that pulling apart, if you will, of business and of assets and of ownership, and it makes everything. There's a spotlight that shines on everything,
mhm.
and I am still really good friends with all of them. We've done other ventures and things together, but it was not an easy time to navigate.
Yes.
We were excited about the sale, so there was a piece that we were okay and excited about, but the actual pulling apart. I mean, there was a lot of um, I don't know, just the gamut of emotions
Mhm.
mixed in because it did. It was very much like a business divorce on really great terms. Like there were certain partners that I spoke to multiple times a day, like our whole lives were intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, we had nothing. Not that we didn't have things in common, but the one thing that held us together, like joined at the hip, was not there anymore. And you
Mhm.
almost feel like, okay, like, how do I fit here? So I
Yes.
can't even imagine not having had a roadmap for how to separate. And that's why I work with so many people who call me and they'll say, I just want to coach with you to see if we should go into a partnership. Like, could we even make it work? And I immediately say to them, you got to get a lawyer and you got to get these agreements in place. Don't do work without it.
Yes.
And I've had a couple in the last year that dissolved and they didn't have the agreements. And
Mm.
so
Oh, I
it is
hate to hear
painful.
that.
It
It's
is,
so
I know it.
painful.
I being there and having done it well, it was still hard. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine the difficulty of not doing it and not having it.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I can tell I will tell you that the top 2 areas of horror stories, which I actually don't like to tell horror stories because I don't like to lead with fear. I like to lead with how we're going to make your
Empowerment.
business strong. Exactly. I
Mhm.
don't believe in that. But I will tell you the top 2 areas of horror stories are business partnerships breaking up and trademark and copyright infringement. Those are the 2 places that cost people the most money. I can't, and they're so avoidable. And so, yeah, if you do your diligence, then it won't even be an issue. But it is really, really important. I've seen mother and daughter go at it. I've sisters, like it's just so many people. So that's a big one. It's a really big area to stress for sure.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, especially when we talk about trying to retain our profits and watch out for our companies and not pay money that we didn't have to pay if we had done it another way. One of the podcasts I just recorded earlier, we talked about if I know that there is a hole in the road, I'm going to tell you where to avoid it because you're probably going to hit other potholes, and this is a pothole to avoid. Like, don't go down that path. Like, we're waving flags at you right now saying
Yes.
don't go down that path. Like, if you're going to do a partnership, create all the proper agreements. And if you are going to have a brand name and a trade name, make sure you do your due diligence. So just if you don't do anything else from this podcast, do those 2 things.
Yes.
Do those 2 things. So, Jimmy, as people are looking for a law firm to work with them and a lawyer, I mean, they can't all have the joy and benefit that I had of meeting you over lunch. But how can they start that process? What are some questions maybe that they should ask of the attorney that they're talking to see if it's a fit for them?
I love this question. Nobody ever asked this question. It's a good one.
Good.
um, so I would ask the attorney their experience with your industry. Make sure that the attorney has worked with other professionals that are in your space.
Hmm.
I would ask the attorney their billing structure and how they bill you, whether there's retainer money that's taken up front, whether they bill hourly on a flat fee basis. In instances of a quick phone call, will you be billed for that? Questions like that are good to know up front. If a project is done on an hourly basis, will the attorney give you an hour's estimate ahead of time? Those are other great questions to ask. If a retainer is taken, how often do you get an accounting? Are you able to, the request that the attorney stop work? All of those items are really important to ask. I'd also give the attorney a little bit of background about your business and what you think the legal issues are, but I'd ask them what they think your business needs, just because you'll know pretty quickly whether or not they understand your business as well. And ask for that complimentary consultation. Not all lawyers do it. But if they do, and I'd say that I'd probably want to work with one that does, and a quick phone call, it doesn't have to be in person or anything. It can be a quick 10-15 minute phone call.
All right, we're
Um,
not talking about an hour consult.
no, no,
No, no.
15 minutes,
Right.
that's all.
But again, isn't that what most of us do in our businesses? Like,
Sure.
I'm thinking from the interior design side, Jamie, we're doing the same thing. We're like having a quick phone conversation with the client to see if we think we can work with them. We're talking to them about maybe how we charge or how we bill, because they're asking those same types of questions of us. And just think about all the questions your clients ask you and how, because everything Jamie has said is, you're just twisting it and saying, ask it right back. You have the right to ask that question.
Oh, and think about how you feel when you're talking to your lawyer. When
Mm.
you're talking to this person, think to yourself, like I always say, you should be okay having a cup of coffee with your lawyer. You shouldn't feel dread or a pit in your stomach when you have to call that person. Now, if you're talking about a touchy subject, that might be the dread or the pit. But if your dread
The
is because
person.
exactly. So separate those feelings. So if you just get a bad vibe and your gut is saying to you, yeah, this person's not a fit, go with that. Listen to your gut. That's okay. It's all right to talk to multiple people, multiple service professionals in any area. And if you do talk to someone and they are a great fit for you, it's totally okay to say, yeah, this is the person I'm going to go with. I don't necessarily believe in price shopping. The cheapest is not always the
Right.
best, like any service professional. So, yeah, there probably always is going to be a cheaper person out there, but really this should be based on your instincts, how you feel when you talk to this person, and knowing whether or not you feel like they're genuine.
Well, Well, you check all those boxes for me. So there you go.
Oh, thank you.
So welcome. Um, what sets your firm apart from others? I think we've probably covered it, but I want you to be able to share that. What do you think really sets your firm apart?
I'm a few things. One, the professionals that we work with. I'm very clear on the types of clients that are a good fit for us. And when someone isn't a good fit, I will be really honest about it. So I don't just take in clients because there's a client that's knocking on our door. We're really selective about who we work with. And so I think that's really important. And I'm blessed to have that luxury. We're very
It's
clear.
taken years to get to that.
It has. It has. It
Yeah.
has. I was not always able to be this selective, and I'm grateful that I can be. So we are selective in who we work with. We do a consultation with anybody who wants one. We are not the type, so we do our fees are based both a billable hour, some flat fee depending on what it is. But the one thing we pride ourselves on is I don't do those point 0.1 bills that you get. So if you're an existing client, we've done work together, you have a super fast question you want to ask me, it's going to take me 5 minutes to write you back. I'm just going to write you back. I'm not going to bill you. We also provide hours estimates for projects. So a client will know what to expect and how to budget because budgets are important and we're mindful of that. And we're very accessible. And so when you email us, we're going to email back. I do have a staff that I work with, and they are amazing. I'm very careful with who I've picked to work with me. And if you're working with one of them, I'm always going to be copied on the email. So even if they're doing work or communicating with you, you're going to know that I've seen everything that goes through the door. And so I think that makes us a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that. Um, uh, we've offered a lot of suggestions and areas to consider in the business in our conversation today. Is there anything else that we've not covered that you think we need to to hit on, or any advice you want to share, or any thoughts?
I'm scared to overwhelm anyone anymore.
How about this? Take stock of all the legal aspects of your company and at least reach out to somebody to get help. How about we do that?
I love that. I think that's really great. Don't panic. How about that?
Panic.
Don't freak out. It doesn't all have to happen at once. I sit down with clients and I put together plans with them. So over a 6-month period, we can accomplish all the things that need to be accomplished. Overwhelm comes when you put too many things on your list and you don't have a plan in place.
Right.
So
And you
make
think
sure.
it needs to all be done at once. And
Yeah.
I love so much how you said, I understand you have a budget. There's a timeline that happens. Like, I didn't realize trademarks could take, 8 months to a year. Now I
Yeah.
know. I didn't know certain things. And so some of it is just being aware. And then, like you said, having that plan. So reach out to a lawyer, your lawyer, Jamie, somebody, and let them help you make a plan. The same way that I'm helping you make a plan to manage your business, let them help you make a plan, to cover all the legalities of the business. Just protect this thing that you're working so hard for. One other thing comment I want to make, Jamie, is the way that you just described, here's who we are and here's what sets us apart and here's how we work. We're all fearful of that open-ended hourly
Yes.
scenario, especially when we're looking outside of our own business. And we need to understand, designers, please listen. You need to understand your clients feel the same way when you're saying, I don't really know how long it's going to take. I can't give you any estimated hours. Everything's custom and different. They feel like you are just have your hand in their checking account. And that it makes people very, very nervous. And so I love, Jamie, that even in your practice, you recognize that and you've kind of put some boundaries around it with, here's the scope of service and here's what we're anticipating. I'm certain that it could be higher or lower, that it can move, but at least you've put, like I call, some bookends around it so that they can trust the process and trust that they're not going to be nickel and dimed.
Exactly. And look, estimates can change, scope can change. And so what I make sure of is if I give someone an hour's estimate, say I've said this is going to take me 4 hours, and I start digging into it and I realize, oh, this is actually going to take 6. I'm going to email them ahead of time and I'm going to explain why and what is causing the issue. And I'm going to get permission to spend the 6 hours. I'm never going to send someone a bill that they're surprised about.
Right, exactly. And that's just good business practice, no matter who we are and what we do.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
What is your podcast?
My podcast is the Fearless Business Podcast, and we talk about all the things that people are afraid of in their business.
I love it. All right, people,
Yes.
you got to go listen to that. Gotta,
Yes.
we'll have a link in the show notes for that, so that everybody can go listen. So, what's one of the next big profit goals in your business?
Oh my goodness.
I know,
That's
like, how are you putting your company in a position to be profitable?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I have a director of operations who she runs my books, and she is a taskmaster.
Good girl.
She's amazing. She is my right hand. Her name is Bree. She keeps us running because that is actually not my strength. I'm good at numbers because I actually have my background. My undergraduate was engineering and economics, so I am very good at looking at numbers and understanding numbers. What I'm not good at is processes and procedures. So the biggest thing that I've actually been looking at is where I'm allocating my expenses, and I've invested a little more in my employees because I want them to stay.
Yeah.
And the cost of an
Pay for good talent.
exactly, the cost of an employee leaving is so much higher than paying them a little more money. But it's not even just that with them. It's sitting down with them and their goals and seeing how we can support them and extra things we can do for my employees. It's made a huge difference.
I love that. I don't know that anybody's ever answered me with that. Um, but it is very true. It is so very true. I had a client the other day who told me that she had one of her employees and just took her out, for coffee and to just sit and talk for a little bit. And that made such a big difference for that employee to feel, cared for in that position. There's a great book called, have you ever heard of the book, The Five Love Languages?
Someone just told me of this. So I'm not a very big business. I'm a huge reader, but I don't
Okay.
tend to read like business or nonfiction books. I tend to gear towards fiction. But
Okay.
someone just told me about this and actually made me take the quiz.
Okay. So if you've done that, then you know that there are five love languages. Well, there is a book by the same author called The Five Appreciation Languages in the Workplace.
Oh,
Because,
that's good.
right? Because the same way that we each need to feel love differently, some by touch, some by words of affirmation, acts of service, that's it, it translates into the workplace. And so what the idea behind it is if you have an employee who really needs words of affirmation, but you give them a $50 gift card, they
Mhm.
may not feel appreciated the same way that you intended for them to feel appreciated.
It's it's
Right.
so interesting, and so we actually had someone come on the podcast, who is an HR expert talking all about, like, giving feedback and working with your staff, and my team is all virtual, so my staff is all over the country,
Mhm.
and staying we use Slack messaging, we use Zoom to have team meetings, monthly team meetings, but one thing that I didn't realize I wasn't doing was actually asking them how they wanted me to communicate,
Mhm.
and they were all different.
Yes.
And so I changed how I communicate with them based on what their needs were.
Mhm.
And it was life changing for everybody. I was
Everybody.
stressing two of them out and
Yes.
I didn't know.
That's a good point because I have people, contractors that work with me all across the US as well. And when we run into something, I'll say, here's what I need from you. Please tell me what you need from me. How do you need me to respond? Do you want it to
Mhm.
be this way? Should I be in this program or this program? Do you want it in Google? You want it in Dropbox? What do you want? What do
Mhm.
you need? But that five languages of appreciation has been really great because, like, if let's say you wanted to give a shout out to somebody on your team who had done a great job, but that person gets horribly embarrassed with that,
Yeah.
then you're thinking that you're giving them accolades and they're thinking, I don't want to do anything to ever make you call me out like that
Yeah.
again. But then their work may actually take a step back so that
Mhm.
they won't be called out. So you get the opposite of what you were intending. Just throwing it out there as you're thinking about your staff, because it's really something to think about. Like, how do you feel appreciated?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So, Jamie, where can everybody find you? Where can we hang out and find you? I know you're on Instagram and all kinds of places.
Yeah, so you can find us at hashtag-legal.com. And you can find us on Instagram, which is my favorite social media channel, which is also #_legal. That's our Instagram channel. We try to have fun with the legal stuff and some non-legal stuff as well. And you can email me directly. Jamie is JAMIE at #-legal.com. And we also have on the site at #-legal.com/negotiation a free negotiation worksheet, because it's something that I talk a lot about when I speak at conferences. That's actually what I spoke about at Podcast Movement. And I love the topic of negotiation, and every service professional can always work on it. So it's a great worksheet that you guys can grab.
That sounds awesome. Would you like to come back and talk about negotiation on the podcast sometime?
Absolutely. It is
Okay.
one of my favorite topics.
Oh, I like it too. So you're already invited. I'll send you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Jamie, thank you so much for sharing with us today and for taking some of the fear out of the legalities, making it accessible and really sharing the importance of doing these things to protect all that we're building. And I just appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Thanks again, Jamie, for joining us today and sharing so freely. If you need legal services, please check out #legal. My goal at Scarlet Thread Consulting is to do just like Jamie and her team, to be a partner in your success and your profits, and to help you look at your business from every direction. Often we're too close to the problem to see it clearly, so let my team help you. Join the Designers Inner Circle, where we answer all of your burning questions, bring in experts to talk about the subjects you care about most, and offer training and education, as well as community along the way. We know, and so do you, that profit doesn't happen by accident. Let us help you make a plan.